In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Imperial Agents Combat Patrol that was released in White Dwarf issue 498. We're going to be taking a look at the rules, at the price, or what you need to pay to actually play this list, and we are going to talk about how well this Combat Patrol list stacks up against the other Combat Patrol lists. So it seems that we are going to get a new Combat Patrol every White Dwarf issue, at least for this year, and that is very exciting. In particular, we are getting a little bit more exotic Combat Patrols, especially this one with Agents of the Imperium is definitely something that I did not expect we would get, but here we are. So let's start by talking about what models you need and what you can expect from this particular list. So what models do you need to play this particular Combat Patrol list? You first up need Vantarion's Entourage, which you are going to get in a Lucidian Starstrider box. This one was available for Kill Team, but you can use it for regular 40k as well, and now for Combat Patrol. But what you additionally need are Voidsmen at Arms. You need 10 of them, not 6, and that is a problem, because you're only going to get 6 in the Lucidian Starstrider box, and that means you need to pick it up twice if you want to have the actual Voidsmen at Arms models that are kind of depicted on the pictures in the White Dwarf for this particular list. I would not advise you actually buy the Lucidian Starstriders box twice, just for 4 models, but you can obviously do whatever you want. I would personally just proxy them. If you are playing Imperial Guard, if you are playing any faction actually that has 25mm bases, you're basically done with your proxy and you can just slot them in there, 4 guys of anything. Imperial Guard just fits the best and you're good to go. And last but not least, you need 20 Imperial Navy Breachers. If you recall the Boarding Patrol box from last year, you quickly notice that the models that are required for this Combat Patrol list are very similar to the Boarding Patrol you can see here. The Verso is not necessary and you are missing 4 Voidsmen at Arms, but if you've picked up this box and if you have the models, all you really need is 4 proxy models and you're good to go. Now I was expecting some Arbites in here simply because I wanted them to diversify the list a little bit, add a little bit of the few units that the Imperial Agents have available to them, but they decided to go for a clear kind of rogue trader on their ship theme, with Imperial Navy Breachers being the first line of defense on your ship as a rogue trader, and obviously the rogue trader themselves with Voidsmen at Arms and so on. It all fits their theme, but yeah, I would have liked for a little more diversity in the list. But on the other hand, this obviously makes this list easier to play, especially for beginners, because all you have are basically 3 data sheets and you're good to go. Now going back real quick to the units themselves, the loadouts are not surprising. They are basically all carrying what you can see on the picture, so more or less what you see is what you get. As far as the Imperial Navy Breachers go, they do make use of most of their options. They have a very varied loadout, and I think that the loadout makes sense for Combat Patrol in specific, simply because they have some close combat options, they have some interesting options to get to high strengths with their demolition charges, you have some options for ranged attacks, and so on. They are very diverse units. And as we are going to see in a little bit, you can make them very, very durable if you wanted to. So what you're getting overall is a rogue trader theme that is clear as day. You're not getting any Arbites, but everything that a rogue trader has access to on their ship. And that is actually cool. That can be really good for narrative play, especially if you wanted to expand this for a Crusade campaign, for example, even though Crusade campaigns are a little bit annoying with the current Imperial Agents, which is why we're all hoping that we are going to get an Imperial Agents Codex, make them a little bit more interesting, diverse, and hopefully to give GW a reason to give them more units, honestly. So let's talk about the datasheets we have access to in this particular Combat Patrol. So first up, we have Edelwyn Vantarion. I have no idea how to pronounce that name, but that is what you're going to have to deal with. She obviously has her entire entourage, which is why her datasheet is so diverse. You are seeing a ton of pistols and a ton of options to actually deal with close combat threats, which is actually very, very valuable considering your Voidsmen at Arms. And most of your Imperial Navy Breachers are ranged units. So they are going to offset that a little bit and they are going to help with every unit you attach these guys to. Furthermore, they have an invulnerable save depending on which datasheet you're looking at. And they have access to a couple of special rules. First up, they have the core special rule of Infiltrators. This allows them to kind of deploy anywhere on the battlefield further than 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone and all of their models, which can be helpful if you want to actually play around that, but most of the time it is probably better to just lay low with your units, stand back, and prevent melee for as long as humanly possible. As far as the special rule goes, it reads Warrant of Trade. If your army includes one or more units with this ability, after players have deployed, select D3 Imperium battle line units from your army and redeploy them. You can use this ability to place those selected units into strategic reserves, regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserves. If both players have abilities that redeploy units, roll off, the winner chooses who redeploys first. Now, the most important thing to understand about this one is that it specifically targets Imperium battle line units. You're going to take a look at the data cards. You're quickly going to notice that your Voidsmen at Arms satisfy that kind of requirement because they are battle line in Imperium. Meanwhile, your Imperial Navy breachers do not satisfy that because they are just Imperium, but no battle line. That means that what you're doing is basically redeploying your Voidsmen at Arms, and that's that. As far as the warrior abilities go, we have Healing Serum. This one reads, models in the Barrows unit have the Feel No Pain 5-up ability. This one is actually what makes this really, really strong and why attaching it to a unit makes a ton of sense. So if you wanted to redeploy the Voidsmen at Arms together with an attached unit of Rogue Traders, you could definitely do that. But attaching them to the Imperial Navy Breachers, which as you can see on the bottom left, is also possible. So if you wanted to buff them up, that is also a possibility. You have a ton of options here. They offer a lot of flexibility, and I think overall this is a great little unit that will do a lot of good in Combat Patrol. I've played with this one, and I wasn't too sure about this one, but they are actually scarier than they look. Next up, we are going to be talking about the Voidsmen at Arms. We have a 6 movement, 3 toughness, 4-up save, 1 wound, 8 leadership or 8+ leadership, and an OC of 2 because they're battle line. Overall, very standard kind of data sheet, is very similar to what an Imperial Guardsman, for example, has, so you will know exactly what to expect. As far as their weapons go, we have access to an Artificer shotgun, we have a last gun, we have a last pistol, and a Voidsman rotor cannon. The rotor cannon is going to be basically the main damage dealer here. You're going to have access to 2 of them, and you're going to have a ton of last guns in there with 1 Artificer shotgun, if I'm not mistaken. So overall, you know, not too much to expect here. As you can see, across the board, AP 0. So if you're playing against a particularly hardy army, like for example Adeptus Custodes, or even Space Marines with a 3-up save, these guys are going to struggle a little bit, but thankfully we have stratagems as well as enhancements to help them out a little bit. We're going to talk about them in a second. As far as their close combat capabilities go, they're a little bit questionable. Overall, they're not going to do a lot. The dog is actually the scariest member of the squad, which is very funny. So yeah, adding the Rogue Traders to this squad makes them a bigger threat in melee and not just a charge target to just destroy. So that is definitely something to consider. And last but not least, we have the Masters of Close Confines ability. Each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack that targets the closest eligible target, that attack has the lethal hits ability. And this is where they get their scariness. Sadly, you know, lethal hits means that you're skipping the wound roll on a hit roll of 6. There are abilities in this particular list to give lethal hits or any critical hits to trigger on a 5-up instead of a 6-up. That is important. But overall, with AP 0, you're going to skip the wound step, and then most of your shots realistically are just going to pling off on their armor. But still, having lethal hits is not bad, and overall, I think this datasheet is more or less as basic as it gets. And last but not least, we have our Imperial Navy Breachers. We have 20 of them with the exact same loadout, so 2 squads of 10. What is interesting about them is that they don't have battle line in this particular combat patrol, but they still retain their OC value of 2, which makes them very valuable, and they're going to be kind of instrumental in holding objectives. As far as their weapons go, we are getting a ton of bolt pistols. Everyone has one. We're getting 1 demolition charge. This one is just 1 shot, so you use it once and you're never going to use this one again. But you have 2 across your army, which is really good. And at strength 12 and AP -2 and damage 2, as well as D6 plus 3 attacks, you're going to be dealing a lot of damage if you're a little bit lucky or you just roll average. As far as the other weapons go, we have 1 Nevis heavy shotgun in your squad. This one just differentiates itself from a regular shotgun in that it has 2 additional attacks. Still, 4 attacks on a strength 4 weapon. It's not bad at all, especially considering that most of the other guys are carrying the same weapon with 2 attacks. And we have a Nevis last volley. This one is also 4 attacks, a little bit of an improved range, and a strength of 6, which is going to be helpful against, for example, Terminators, which you're still going to be wounding on 3s. So overall, the weapon loadout is quite diverse, but it doesn't stop here. We have some melee weapons that we need to talk about. We have one guy per squad with a chain fist with the anti-vehicle 3-up rule, which obviously means that on the wounding step, you're always going to be wounding anything with the vehicle keyword on a 3-up for free, and you're going to be hitting them with a strength 6, AP -2, and damage to attack. What is a little bit annoying is that it is a weapon skill 5 attack, so you're going to most likely not hit with this one. Then we have a ton of close combat weapons. Basically everyone has one. And then we have one power weapon per squad, which is just your basic power weapon. 2 attacks, strength 4, AP -2, damage 1. So overall, these are not bad in melee, but they have huge trouble hitting. Especially the chain fist is, I felt in my games, a little bit more decorative than it's actually useful. Hitting on a 5-up without the necessary means to really make them hit a little bit more consistently and actually buff that is a little bit annoying, but you know, it is what it is. And then we have the abilities. We have Breaching Team, which reads each time a model in this unit makes an attack, reroll a wound roll of 1. And if the target is on an objective, you can reroll the wound roll instead. And this one is very good. I wish it was the hit roll instead, because hitting is probably more of a problem than wounding with this particular squad, but we still appreciate having a potential reroll to wound rolls. Then we have war gear abilities. We have an endurance shield. One of your units in the squad has a shield, so you can take certain high AP attacks if no one in the squad is wounded, obviously already, on that guy if you wanted to. And you can patrol squad them. So at the start of the declare battle formation step, before any units have been set up, this unit can be split into 2 units, each containing 5 models. This is very useful because you want to control a battlefield at times. Depending on what secondary objective your opponent picks, you might be able to deny them the midfield altogether for 2 or 3 turns until your Imperial Navy breachers and your Voidsman at Arms slowly die on turn 3 or 4. And yeah, overall, this is going to be a very helpful ability. I've made use of patrol squads quite a lot. I never patrol squadded them whenever I attached my rogue trader to them, but overall I really like that I can just split them up in units, maybe have different weapons in a particular squad that is on a particular side, and so on. So it opens a ton of options, especially with a unit that has OC2. So now that we know what the datasheets do and what units we have access to, let's talk about the rules to support them. First up, you don't get an army rule. The Imperial agents don't have an army rule, and that's that. But GW thankfully balanced them in a way where you definitely notice in the stratagems as well as the enhancements and the secondaries that they've been given a little bit of an extra advantage to offset that balance. So don't worry too much about that. So the first rule we have is the default enhancement, and it is called Void War Veterans. This one reads, each time a model in the bearer's unit makes a ranged attack, a critical hit is scored on an unmodified hit roll of 5-up instead of a 6. In addition, once per battle round, you can target the bearer's unit with the Fire Overwatch stratagem for 0 CP, and when doing so, hits are scored on an unmodified hit roll of 5-up while resolving that stratagem. This is incredibly strong, especially with units that really want to overwatch, with units that don't have too much of a melee weapon to help them out in close combat and so on. Is looking at the Voidsman and Arms in specific, this is extremely helpful, and their volume of attacks really enables them to really make use of that Fire Overwatch stratagem for free. So you're going to be using it all the time and as much as you can, and scoring critical hits is going to be easier for the Voidsman at Arms, and that makes their lethal hits all that much more important. So overall, Void War Veterans makes a ton of sense if you want to attach your leader unit to the Voidsman at Arms. They benefit a lot from this one, and it's overall a very, very strong enhancement. And the optional enhancement reads Star Shell Bombardment. In your command phase, select one enemy unit on the battlefield. Until the start of the next command phase, halve the move characteristic of models in that enemy unit and subtract 1 from advance and charge rolls made for it. Now, while the default enhancement is very, very strong and flashy, and a lot of people are going to know or play it, Star Shell Bombardment is extremely useful against armies that are just overwhelmingly melee. I've picked Star Shell Bombardment without fail against World Eaters, for example, and while that didn't save me too much, it did make a noticeable difference, and I don't think Void War Veterans would have helped me out as much as Star Shell Bombardment did. So yeah, controlling the battlefield, slowing your opponents, especially against lists like, the World Eaters, like for example, any other heavily melee targeted list, is going to be very, very useful. So both enhancements, as I said, are very, very strong and have their use cases. Void War Veterans is a good default choice because it's going to make sense against most of the armies. Meanwhile, Starship Bombardment is only going to be useful against armies like Tyranids, World Eaters, and so on. And meanwhile, it's going to be very, very useless against armies like Combat Patrol, Imperial Guard, or any other ranged focused list like most of the AdMech Combat Patrols and so on. Next up, we have our secondary objectives. We have the default one, which is glittering prizes. This is basically just a gambling secondary, which is actually really fun. At the end of your turn, if your warlord is within range of an objective marker, roll 1d6. On a 1, you score 1 victory point. On a 2 to 4, you score d3 plus 1 victory points. And on a 5 up, you score 4 victory points. This one is pretty fun and can be great if you just want to run around, if you don't feel like your warlord is in too much trouble getting just shot to death. So if you feel confident that you can keep your warlord safe and keep them alive, this one is actually a pretty good default secondary objective. As far as the optional one goes, this one is called Landing Party. At the end of your opponent's turn, if you have one or more units from your army wholly within your opponent's deployment zone and one or more units from your army wholly within no man's land, you score 5 victory points. Otherwise, if you have one or more units from your army wholly within your deployment zone and no man's land, you get 2 victory points. This one could be potentially very easy to score against armies that have few units, or units that you can quickly decimate, like Adeptus Custodes, like Grey Knights, simply because your leader unit has the warrant trait, and whenever you redeploy your Voidsman at arms, you can also place them in strategic reserves, and that enables them to at some point pop up very close or in your opponent's deployment zone, and at that point you're going to have a great time just moving in there, holding that, and getting those additional victory points because you're going to be in no man's land most of the time anyway. And yeah, your Voidsman at arms can just do their thing and die at some point, but they're going to score you a ton of victory points along the way. So this is definitely something to consider. I personally wouldn't attach your leader unit to the Voidsman at arms when doing that, simply because at that point they are just there to score you as many victory points as they can before dying. So all they are going to do is take cover and try not to die. And then you just attach, your leader unit to Imperial Navy Breachers, and at that point you're just going to push forward with them and try to hold no man's land as best as you can, because that is going to be the most contested area. So with the secondary objectives, both are very strong, but both have quite steep requirements. One requires your warlord to be within range of an objective marker and be alive. That is actually not that easy, but you're going to be scoring quite a few victory points. Most of the time, I would expect to get 2 victory points per turn, which is not a lot, but 10 in total is not bad either. And if you're really lucky, you could easily get 12 victory points, 16 victory points. So yeah, it all depends on you rolling the dice and being lucky. And I've seen glittering prizes win games, even though I did not deserve to win them. And that happened once. So it can be a very fun secondary objective, or frustrating if you're the opponent and your friend just rolls really well and is getting a ton of victory points before they get wiped off the table. And then Landing Party enables you to play very aggressively. It enables you to make the most out of the abilities from your army, and it requires you to play a little bit more strategically and consider the special abilities of all of your datasheets, which is basically why I recommend going with the default selections here first if you're a beginner, and then later on exploring the optional secondary objective to maybe try it out against certain matchups and see how it feels. Last but not least, we have our stratagems. First up, we have Small Arms Broadside. You use it in your shooting phase for 1 CP, you use 1 Navis Imperialis unit as your target, and then the effect is until the end of the phase, improve the attacks and ballistic skill characteristics of ranged weapons equipped by models in your unit by 1. This makes them infinitely more reliable, and this is going to be the stratagem that you are going to be using the most. I would wager you are going to be using it every single turn, unless obviously your units are all tied up in melee combat, at which point it doesn't make too much of a difference because your pistols are not going to do anything. But as long as you're in range combat, as long as you get your shots off, I would always use Small Arms Broadside on 1 unit and make the most out of this stratagem. It is basically a base requirement. Then we have Bulkhead by Bulkhead. This one is for 1 CP, and it reads, when in your opponent's movement phase, just after an enemy unit ends a normal move, advance, or fallback move, one Navis Imperialis unit, which had an opposing unit, be within 9 inches, and then you can move d6 inches. Now, I wish this one was a little bit more reliable. I know that we've seen this stratagem a lot, and I think for this particular army, it would have made sense to not roll a d6, but to have 4 inches fixed. I think this would have been a lot better, made it a lot less frustrating, because moving 1 inch for 1 CP is very frustrating. And it's definitely something that you need to consider when using this one. So out of all the rules that we've seen so far, I think this is by far the weakest one. And you're going to make just use out of this one if you're desperately trying to get away from something or increase their charge range, because they are at 7 inches, maybe, for example, for a charge, and improving that to 8 inches required to make a charge is a huge difference. Meanwhile, if they are right in front of you and they have a 2-inch charge, for example, at that point, this stratagem is not going to save you. And last but not least, we have Shipmaster's Vengeance, this one for 1 CP as well. You're using it in your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. You use 1 Navis Imperialis units from your army, and the effect is, until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit is destroyed, roll 1d6 on a 4-up, do not remove the destroyed model from play. It can shoot, and then it's basically shooting on death on a 4-up. This one also very useful. Your army has a lot of shooting, a lot of very useful shooting, and this stratagem definitely makes sure that your units are going to get their shooting off. So as far as spending command points in this combat patrol goes, you're going to make a ton of use of Small Arms Broadside and Shipmaster's Vengeance. Meanwhile, Bulkhead by Bulkhead is going to be a very situational stratagem. Not saying it's bad or completely useless, it is just so unreliable that I'm not a big fan of this one. So how did it play? Honestly, I've just been playing 3 games with this one because this was very recent and I had to proxy all the models because I didn't have a single unit. But it was a ton of fun. It was surprisingly a lot of fun because if you look at the list, you expect them to die relatively quickly because it's just 1 wound, a 4-up save, and so on. But if you look at the entire list, you're going to notice that you're running 34 models or something like that. You are having a ton of bodies. And 10 of those bodies, or 14 should I say, are going to have a 5-up Feel No Pain. And then you're going to have incredible enhancements and secondary objectives to actually make it worthwhile. Now I'm going to say now the same thing that I say about all the White Dwarf combat patrols. They are going to die and get decimated against strong 9th edition combat patrols. That is just how it goes. I test it all the time, I get my ass beat, and then we move on. I played against the Eldari combat patrol, and the Wind Raiders in there just chew through your units like it's nothing. And you have basically, outside of your demolition charges, you're going to really struggle hurting the Wraith Lord and so on. You get the idea. But against the White Dwarf combat patrols, or any combat patrol this far that has released in 2024 or 2023, so basically 10th edition, you're going to have a great time with this one. And I think the more we move on with combat patrol, the more it is going to stay the same. All the new combat patrols are going to be just fun to play if you play them against the right other combat patrols. I don't think this should be necessary, and I hope that GW takes the time to actually balance this one. Because Combat Patrol thus far is its own system. So if you look, for example, at the Combat Patrol Adeptus Mechanicus, they did not get their improved saves, they did not get their improved anything. So everything is more or less in a stasis as it was at the launch of 10th edition, and it feels like nothing is ever going to change. And I hope at least once a year they take the time, update all the Combat Patrol lists, make it a little bit more fun, maybe adjust the Eldari and, Dark Angels and so on Combat Patrols to be a little bit more playable against these ones. But as far as the lists go, honestly, you have a ton of Combat Patrols to choose to play against with this one. You can also pick some of the 9th edition Combat Patrols that are a lot of fun to play against, like the Astra Militarum one, or for example, the basic Space Marine one, or, just the weaker ones in general. And you're going to have a great time. If you pick the stronger ones, you're not going to be able to do anything, and the game is going to get a little bit boring. Although, you can definitely outscore even the better combat patrols with this one simply by rolling well, which is fun. So if you ever find yourself playing this particular combat patrol against one of the stronger ones, definitely make use of the default secondary and hope you roll well. So as far as the cost for this particular Combat Patrol list goes, because there is no Combat Patrol for White Dwarf Combat Patrols, you're going to have to buy 2 boxes of Elicidian Star Striders and 2 boxes of Imperial Navy Breachers to get this particular loadout with all the official models. Now, what I would obviously recommend is you just buy 1 box of Elicidian Star Striders and 2 boxes of Imperial Navy Breachers, and you just find 4 other 25mm based models. Anything. It's going to be fine, and I'm sure your friends won't mind that you're proxying those 4 models. It is going to be easier if you play Imperial Guard, because I think that the just basic guardsmen fit in more or less seamlessly, but yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, that is the entire review. I just wanted to go over the rules, talk a little bit about my impressions of this particular Combat Patrol on the battlefield, because I think it has its merits. I think it's fun to run a ton of models in Combat Patrol. This time around over 30. I think there are very few Combat Patrols that can actually match that number outside of maybe Tyranids. So yeah, this is fun. If you have the models especially, you should play this one. Just try it out. The rules are out there if you need them. But actually buying the White Dwarf is also not a bad idea, because you get the cards and so on as punch-outs, I think they are called. So yeah, you actually have them in front of you, and it's actually a nice thing. Furthermore, if you've not been paying attention to the White Dwarf Combat Patrols, the cards that you get are very, very handy. So you have all the stratagems and all the rules you need on a single card, and then you have the data sheets on separate cards, and it's actually really fun to use and really easy to use. So I highly recommend buying the White Dwarf for your favorite White Dwarf Combat Patrol, because that way you have the easiest time playing it. As far as upgrades go and so on, I'm not going to cover them here, because Agents of the Imperium are not fleshed out enough to actually talk about this. I know that the Agents of the Imperium already have a big fan base. I know the Reddit is quite big, but we are going to have to wait for the actual codex, for the actual rules and so on, which they are hopefully going to get in the next couple of months. And at that point, upgrades are going to be way more interesting. So for now, there are not going to be any upgrades or anything, but in the future, I'm definitely going to do upgrades and so on. As far as the future goes, we are going to obviously review all the White Dwarf Combat Patrols. I'm going to review more Vanguard boxes for Age of Sigmar. I'm going to review Spearhead boxes in the future once 4th edition rolls around. I'm going to review more Combat Patrol boxes. So if you have any boxes that you would like to see me review, which are not yet updated to 10th edition standards and so on, drop it down in the comments below. If you have any questions, or if you have made a mistake somewhere, drop it down in the comments below as well, and we'll discuss things there. Other than that, I hope this was insightful, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.